Hi, my name is Stephanie Bendixson, and I'm your host for the Business of Indie Games Virtual Summit for 2018. And today with me, I have David Clark. So welcome, David. Great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So David started his career working in the distribution of Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega, which is awesome, and has invested and started many game companies and sat on various boards and things like that. He was the founding director of Greenman Gaming, retail distribution back in 2015, and is now the managing director of the publishing arm, which is geared towards adding highly retail and commercial focus to publishing indie games, which is super valuable for this summit. So thank you so much for being here, David. It's great to talk to you.
Cool. Excellent. I'm blushing after that introduction.
Well, we'll get straight into it. I guess my first question would be, you've had such a prolific career in video games. What was the experience of setting up the retail arm of Green Man Gaming?
Hard work and long nights, I think it can be summarized as. It was very different to publishing. It's obviously it's part of the same industry, but it marches to a different beat to the publishing side of the businesses, which is what I've always been involved in. It's kind of, in some respects, it's a bit of sort of gamekeeper turned poacher, or poacher turned gamekeeper, I should say, experience, because you're sitting on the other side of the fence. But it's been quite some ride, and fortunately, the guys that have mainly driven the business have they're tremendous guys, and they've done a fantastic job, and it's been a very successful journey so far.
And when you set up the publishing arm, I suppose what was your mission for the company, for Green Man Gaming, when you sort of set it up in terms of publishing?
Well, I mean, just a little technical change there. I mean, I didn't actually set up the business. I now run it, but
sure.
there was a colleague of mine, Gary Rowe, who set it up. But it dates back to the goal of behind setting up the publishing arm dates back to a conversation that I had with our CEO, Paul Shuliok, about 4 or 5 years ago, about the value of IP. And in a digital world, if you look at what some of the big giants, and I don't for 1 minute suggest that Green Man Gaming are like an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft, but if you look at what they're doing, is they're moving up and down the vertical chain, and looking to increasingly control more and more of the ecosystem in which they operate in. And part and parcel of that is creating IP, owning IP, because IP is where the value is. Not only does it give revenue value, but it gives value to the company. And so, the principle remains the same with Green Man Gaming, and Green Man Gaming have sought to move beyond being a pure retailer of DRM keys, such as Steam, into other areas, and that's sort of business to business type relationships, and such as we have with Intel, but also the publishing side. And that's currently manifesting itself in terms of indie games, indie PC games at the moment, Steam DRM keys, and growing our publishing business through that route, which gives value to Green Man Gaming.
And I suppose being able to benefit from a lot of sort of hard data and then inside marketing knowledge from your retail distribution experience, I mean, how does that make a difference in, I suppose, the games that you decide to publish?
Well, it's fundamental. Is not only does it make a difference in the games that we decide to publish, but it also makes a difference in how we bring them to the market. And, as a retailer, we've got 8 years worth of sales data. We know what sells. We know what's selling. We know when it sells. We know where it sells, and we know how much it sells for. And that gives us a valuable insight into where the market's going, where the market currently is, and what the opportunity is for particular games in particular genres. And that's a fairly unique proposition. And of course, also, we sell stuff. It's what our business is. We are exceptionally good at selling stuff. And particularly with the demise of Steam Spy, which a lot of developers and publishers use to build their business models, we now find ourselves in a fairly unique position that we have an insight to the market that, quite frankly, very few other people do. And it's what sets us apart, and it's what allows us to continue to succeed and to grow.
A lot of indie developers and kind of newer developers are really searching for ways to understand how they can get published. Can you walk us through your greenlight process?
The bottom line is the whole industry is built around the quality of the game. There's the magic that us publishers bring to the table is nothing without a good game. So that's fundamentally where it starts. And the definition of a good game could be 1,000,001 different things depending upon the type of game, the genre, the
Sure.
audience, so on and so forth. But you have to have a good game. Beyond that, the difference, I think, that when a developer approaches a publisher, it's a bit like submitting your CV. You're going for a job. You've got, you're in with 100 other candidates looking for that fantastic job. And, the recruiters, the company you're applying for, sitting down there, and he's got 100 CVs in front of them. And, of which 50 people are probably highly suited for the job. And, how do you sift down those 50? Well, it's the quality of the CV, it's the quality of the presentation. And that's exactly the same principle when applying, when a developer approaches a publisher. It all comes down to the quality of the pitch. It doesn't have to be a long pitch. It doesn't have to be super flashy, but it's got to be to the point, and it's got to cover all the bases. I want to know who you are. So if you're asking for $1 million, yet this is your first ever game and you've never done anything in the video games industry, I think the chances are that you're probably going to fail.
Sure.
So I need to know who you are and your background and how, what you've done. And if it's your first game, that's fine, but you tailor your pitch accordingly. I want to know what the game is, and I want to know what makes it special. As we all know out there, if you look in just in the world of Steam, discoverability is the single biggest issue that everybody's faced with. Sure. So what makes your game stand apart from the rest? What's the route to the audience? Is there an audience for your game? Where does that audience reside? If it's a board game, that's fantastic. There's a whole audience out there. This is where you'll find them. As a publisher, yes, that's my job to reach that audience. But at an initial stage, I haven't got time to do the research. So help me on that one. And then, of course, it's the quality of the materials that are associated with the game, compelling screenshots and all the rest of it. So, like I say, it's like applying for a job. You've got to put your best foot forward, and you've got to stand apart from the crowd.
Are there key features that you would be able to sort of identify that would make you more likely to publish a no-name title, like an indie developer that doesn't have any kind of background or experience?
There's never a key feature. I mean, every game's unique, and there's so many different genres and so many different audiences. So so there's no overriding sort of rules. If there was a magical formula that says, do this, do that, and do the other, and you'll have a successful game, well, quite frankly, we'd all be millionaires, and I probably wouldn't have a job. So don't do that. But so there is no magical formula to this. So for a first-time indie developer, it's everything that I said about pitching your product and viewing it as your CV, but it's also realistic as well. I mean, as I say, coming to a publisher and expecting a publisher to stump up, I don't know, $250,000, $500 million, $1 million, and it's your first ever game, and you've got no track record in running any business of any sort. quite frankly, you're wasting everybody's time. There's no shame in it being your good game. And I have personally published games, so many games where it's been their first ever, developer's first ever title. And they've been brilliant, absolutely brilliant games. But these guys have been realistic. They might, if they're asking for any money at all, it's reasonable sums of money. And I think that's the big message that I would give to a first-time developer. Be realistic in your expectations and understand, if the publisher says no, understand why they're going to say no.
So apart from asking for unrealistic amounts of money when you have no experience in, I suppose, business or game design, what are the things that would immediately put you off? Immediately.
Everything's about being realistic. If it's your first ever game, don't come to me and say, I'm going to put this out on PC, Microsoft, PlayStation and Switch. And because you can't do it, you're not going to be able to do it. If you're going to do a multiplayer game, a massively multiplayer game, you better be pretty damn persuasive that you have the technical understanding to deliver. The other thing as well, we had a conversation literally this week and there's a dev studio out in Southeast Asia that put together and these are the first-time dev team. Brilliant game, absolutely brilliant game, massively multiplayer, and I'd love to take it. But the problem is that, again, they've been slightly unrealistic and slightly naive in their approach. They will run out of money in the next few months. They have to get the product out. But the problem is that, and I'd love to put that game out, but they've got, they run out sometime sort of towards the end of the year. Well, the problem with that is that I've got Red Dead Redemption and I've got 1,001 other AAA titles coming out in that period. Don't go out in that period. So now we either move backwards into next 2019, which they can't afford to do, or we bring it forwards. So now we're into September. Well, hold on, it's kind of like, it's almost July. You've got no audience, you haven't stress tested the game. And there's no awareness out there. Nobody knows about your game. With the best will in the world, I physically can't generate. I haven't got enough time. There's not enough days left between now and launch to generate enough awareness. And, I can't afford in this particular case, or the commercial realities of life are that, we can't subsidize the game, and it's too much of a high risk for us to do anything with. So again, one of the other things that and this isn't just first time devs, it's so many developers who should, quite frankly, many of whom should know better. There's no factoring in of the marketing stroke publishing process. You've got to get development's a linear process. You do X, you do Y, you do Z, and then you launch. And what most developers tend to do is they do that, they get the game ready, right, marketing, we're out in 3 weeks' time, let's do some marketing. It doesn't work like that. You needed to have done that 6 months ago. And so that's the other thing, is that when you're bringing, no matter who you are, no matter what type of developer you are, when you're bringing your product to market, factor in enough time for your awareness program. It's got to be done. So many great games have failed because they've ignored that bit.
We were talking about discoverability before. Since that is getting so difficult for the indie games that you do publish that are sort of smaller, what sort of things can you do to give them a better chance?
Well, I mean, it ties back into what I was just saying. It is all about awareness. It's all about planning. When you launch, particularly if you've got a multiplayer game. So multiplayers, if there's nobody in the servers when that game launches, that game's dead instantly, because people will, the first few people will buy it, and there's nobody there, there's no enjoyment, it's gone, and it will be sort of put in the lost games bucket. So it's especially important for those guys, but even for single player games, it's all about awareness. It's all about building up to awareness. It takes, I don't know what the exact number is, okay, but it's hundreds of games a day being launched on Steam. If you look at it this way, I was speaking to a PR the other day, and he was saying in the UK, where I'm based, right, for every one journalist, professional paid journalist, there are 4 PRs chasing them, and they physically can't cope. So if I put a game out to them and say, will you please look at my game here? Right, they may well look at it, but they'll look at it after they've got through that other list of titles. So it might be 2 months down the line. So I've got to allow enough time to introduce my game to them, attract them to my game, and then for them to get round to actually looking and doing something with it. So, if I'm this Asian game that I was talking about, and that's out in looking to launch in September, it's too late. I can't, and so if you're launching under those circumstances, well, the chances are you're going to fail unless you're very lucky. And that's what, as a publisher, be it of indie games or far more established studios, games from far more established studios, that's what a publisher is here to do, is to make you look and think about the big picture. What we do is not rocket science, but what we're here to do is to take you outside of the development bubble that as a developer you're sitting in, and to see the big picture, and to then plug in all the missing bits and to coordinate them. And if nothing else, a developer can probably do that themselves, but for every minute they're spending on all the things that we do as a publisher is a minute they're not spending on development. And that's why you need that relationship. Always have a publisher is my advice.
Do you always know when a game is going to do really well? An indie game, that is.
No. Again, I'd be a hugely rich, successful publisher. No is the answer, and the reason for that is, I've always, like you said in the intro, the first game I ever worked on was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. All right, and even back in those days, right, there was no guarantees. And I quickly realized that as much as we're a part of the video games industry, actually we're part of the fashion industry, and as with any fashion, you don't actually know what's going to be the hip fashion of tomorrow. So if I take a game on today, realistically, the chances are it's going to be 12 months down the line, unless I'm lucky and, I'm picking up a game that's 2 or 3 months out or whatever. But broadly speaking, you're working on a 12, 18-month cycle. And you're trying to second guess where the market will be in 12 or 18 months' time, which is a hugely problematical, difficult thing. Now, Greenman Gaming, so that's an area of risk. What a publisher is here to do is 2 things. 1, we maximize revenues is our goal. But 2, and this is what most people tend to forget about, we're here to minimize risk, both for ourselves and for the developer. And one of the ways we minimize risk, which is where Greenman Gaming really come to the fore because of our, as we were saying earlier, with this data that we've got, is that we can analyze the trends in the market and we can spot the gaps. Okay, that seriously de-risks a game, but it doesn't mitigate the risk 100%. We are still beholden to fashion, where the market's going. Who would have thought that Goat Simulator would have been the massive hit that it was? It just captured the imagination and then, just exploded onto the market. And so that's what we're always up against. And that's where that's the magical, the X factor that always sits in the games industry. So there is no formula. You can't spot these things. You can't legislate for it 100%. You've just got to make sure that you narrow that level of risk to such a small amount that you've got half a chance of making some money out of it.
So David, you're actually getting one of the publishers that's part of the global indie matchmake. What kinds of games or themes particularly interest you right now?
We don't particularly publish to a special theme. There's some publishers out there that, I don't know, they'll do Japanese games, or they'll do simulation games, or MMO, whatever. We don't do that. We take every game on its face value. I'd say that the one thing that we do look for, we see ourselves as a sort of a mid-core publisher. We're not hardcore games, we're not mass market games, we're not casual games, we're that mid-core. That's what we look for. That can manifest itself across a whole myriad of genres. But that's where we sit. As time moves on, maybe we'll evolve into a particular niche or whatever. But right now, that's what we're looking for.
And David, if people wanted to reach out to you on Twitter, we're running a bit of a Q&A just continuously throughout the summit, and they wanted to contact Greenman Gaming, how would they do that?
There's a number of ways. I mean, you'll find us across all social media. Greenman Gaming @ Greenman Gaming is the handle for just about everything that we do. We actually, I mean, in terms of connecting with potential developers, it's a hugely powerful tool. Twitter is for us. I mean, the number of conversations we get into with developers through Twitter. So my advice to everybody, dig us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, we're there. We respond, and we review just about every game, short of the truly, truly appalling stuff. Every game gets reviewed. Everybody will get a response from us. 9 times out of 10, it's a no, but we will. Here's why it's a no, and we will give a response. We're desperately keen to connect with everybody that's out there.
Thank you so much for your time. That was hugely insightful, and I'm sure a lot of people that are taking part in the summit will be very grateful for all of the super useful information that you've given us today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.